Ariana Brooks showed up at the courthouse to begin her first day as a federal prosecutor. But before she could even walk through the front doors, a white court officer stopped her and told her to wait outside without checking her ID. She said nothing at first, but when the truth about who she really was came out, the entire courthouse froze. Have you ever seen someone judge the wrong person based on how they look? Tell us in the comments, and now let's get into the story. Ariana Brooks had never been late to a courthouse in her life, and she didn't plan to start today, not on her first official day as a federal prosecutor. Her shoes tapped firmly against the granite sidewalk as she crossed the plaza, head-high briefcase in hand. She had worked her whole life for this moment. Everything was aligned: credentials, appointment letter, security clearance. She wasn't there to observe. She belonged inside. But just 2 steps from the courthouse doors, her path was blocked by a man in uniform. "Stop right there!" the officer barked, raising one hand in front of her like a traffic signal. "You can wait back there." Ariana froze. "I'm sorry. You heard me?" His tone didn't waver. Back behind the railing. No entry right now. She glanced at the entrance. There was no line, no crowd. "I have an appointment with the chief prosecutor. I'm scheduled to be inside at 9. The man didn't budge. His badge read, Bowen. He was broad-shouldered, maybe in his 40s, white, clean-shaven, with mirrored sunglasses perched on his cap. His stance said control. His tone said judgment. He looked her over once, slow, deliberate. From her tailored navy blue blazer to her pressed slacks, her modest heels to the soft leather bag resting on her shoulder. But he didn't reach for an ID. He didn't ask her name. He only smirked. "Everyone's got an excuse," he said. "Doesn't mean you're on the list." She blinked. "You haven't even asked for my name," he shrugged. "I don't need to. I can usually tell." Ariana's eyes narrowed, but she kept her voice level. "Tell what exactly?" Bowen tilted his head, speaking slower this time. "That you're not someone who needs to be inside just yet." Just then, a white man in khakis and a button-down shirt approached from the side. Bowen stepped aside, gave him a polite nod, and let him walk straight through the doors without a word. The man didn't pause, didn't flash ID, didn't even say hello. Ariana turned back, her voice colder now. "You didn't stop him." Bowen didn't blink. "He's a lawyer. I've seen him before. And I'm a prosecutor. First day. You want to see the paperwork?" He ignored the offer. "Look, ma'am, you can stand over there, or I can have security escort you off the premises until you're called." Behind her, a woman's voice piped up, cutting through the rising tension. She's probably just trying to sneak into a hearing. Ariana turned slowly. It was a white woman, blonde, early 30s, court clerk badge clipped to her blouse. She wasn't even hiding the disdain. "Some folks show up dressed like they matter," the woman added, smirking. "Doesn't mean they do." A few heads turned. A security guard down the steps glanced over but didn't move. Ariana exhaled slowly, trying to keep her voice even. "I'm here to work, not to perform." Bowen took a step closer. "Look, lady, this doesn't have to be a problem unless you make it one." Her heart rate ticked up, but her expression didn't change. "You're escalating a situation that doesn't need escalation," she said quietly. He leaned in, a little lowering his voice like he was giving her a warning. "I've seen people try to lie their way through these doors before. You're not the first." Then he reached a hand toward her bag, fingers outstretched. She stepped back fast. Her voice, when it came, sliced through the space between them. "Do not touch me." Something in her tone cracked the air. Bowen's hand froze mid-reach. "I've said nothing," she continued, "about how you're handling this. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't made a scene. But if you lay one finger on me without legal cause, you'll be answering for it in more than just a report." For the first time, Bowen's mouth tightened. His fingers curled, slightly pulling back. The smirk drained from his face, but he didn't apologize. She squared her shoulders. "You're making a mistake." That line landed heavier than the rest, not because it was loud, but because it was quiet, measured, final. And suddenly, for the first time in the last 5 minutes, the man in uniform seemed unsure of what came next. The sidewalk was still. No one spoke. And Ariana Brooks stood there, not moving an inch, not flinching, not explaining herself anymore. Not yet. The sun had climbed higher by the minute, and Ariana Brooks was still standing on the courthouse steps, exactly where Officer Travis Bowen had told her to stay. Her shoes were beginning to press against the concrete in a way that made her ankles ache, but she didn't move. She didn't shift her weight. She just stood there, still holding the leather strap of her briefcase while people walked past her without so much as a glance. They were all walking through the doors she was told were not open yet. Men in suits, women in heels, paralegals carrying files, attorneys with coffee cups and tired eyes, all white, all unbothered. Some nodded at Bowen and kept going. None were stopped. None were told to wait outside. But Ariana stood in place like a statue, watched like a security risk. Bowen had retreated to his original post near the door, arms crossed, sunglasses now shading his face. But even behind the tint, Ariana could feel his eyes following her every breath. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look rushed. If anything, he looked entertained. When the next man in a navy pinstripe suit strolled past without a word exchanged, Ariana's jaw tensed. She turned slightly, just enough to make eye contact. "You didn't stop him," she said, not loud, just firm. Bowen gave a dry chuckle. "He's a defense attorney. Been coming here for years. I don't need to see his badge." Ariana didn't answer. She didn't need to. She could feel the heat crawling up the back of her neck, not just from the sun, but from the weight of it all. "Look," Bowen said after a beat, "we've seen it all. People dressing up, talking big. Fancy clothes don't make you a lawyer." His tone was sharper now. Not casual anymore, but edged with something familiar, something meaner. There was something satisfying in the way he said it, like he'd found a groove he liked. "Seen folks show up like they just came from a magazine," he went on, trying to talk their way in. "But credentials talk. And yours haven't said a word." A few feet away, a young man in jeans and a hoodie slowed down. He didn't say anything, just stood near the curb holding up his phone as if texting. But the way the camera was angled, it was no text. He was recording. Another minute passed. Ariana didn't speak, but her fingers tightened slightly around the strap of her case. Bowen noticed. Thinking about calling someone, he asked, almost amused. "I am," she said quietly. He laughed. "Go ahead. Call your boyfriend. Maybe he can come down here and explain how courthouses work." The man filming took a step closer, just a hair. He wasn't the only one watching now. 2 clerks at the security desk inside the building had turned their heads. One of them, an older man with graying hair, whispered something to the other. But neither moved. Ariana pulled out her phone, unlocked it, and pressed a contact without looking up. It rang once. Twice. Then, from just beyond the lobby doors, someone spoke. "Is there a problem here?" The voice was deep, calm. Not loud, but enough to cut through the weight hanging in the air. Officer Darnell Hayes stepped forward from the interior security checkpoint, a clipboard tucked under one arm, the other resting casually on his belt. He was tall, broad, older than Bowen, with a salt and pepper beard and a presence that commanded pause. His badge caught the light as he approached. Bowen turned slightly, caught off guard by the interruption. "Just handling a potential issue," he said quickly, trying to control the flow before it gets crowded. Hayes glanced at Ariana, then back at Bowen. "What kind of issue?" Bowen gestured half-heartedly. "She says she's here on legal business, but I don't see her on any call list. Told her to wait like everyone else." Hayes looked at Ariana again, this time for more than a second. "What's your name, ma'am?" "Ariana Brooks." He blinked once. "And you're here for—" "I'm scheduled to meet Chief Prosecutor Delgado," she said. "At 9. Bowen let out a soft scoff behind her. Hayes didn't respond to it. He was looking at Ariana differently now, not just assessing processing. Behind them, the camera was still rolling. The wind had picked up slightly. Even the courthouse doors seemed to hesitate. Ariana lowered her phone without saying a word. She didn't need to finish the call anymore, because now the tone had shifted. For a long second, no one moved. Officer Hayes stood there, eyes fixed on Ariana, not blinking, not speaking. He wasn't rushing to judgment, but something in his expression shifted, like a man connecting puzzle pieces he hadn't even known were missing. I asked again. "Ms. Brooks," he said, lowering his voice. "You said you're here to meet Chief Prosecutor Delgado?" Ariana nodded, her tone even. "Yes. I'm scheduled for a closed-door briefing at 9. You can check the internal security sheet under DOJ cross-clearance." From behind, Travis Bowen snorted. "That's rich," he muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're here to meet Delgado. You think saying a big name gets you past protocol?" Ariana turned to face him fully now. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her hand moved to her shoulder bag. Calmly, she unzipped it and pulled out a single envelope, white thick, with a gold Department of Justice seal pressed clean at the top. No embellishments. Just one clear line of text, visible through the protective sleeve appointment confirmation. Federal Prosecutor, District 9. She held it up between two fingers. The silence that followed didn't feel accidental. It felt like gravity. Hayes stepped forward first. He took the envelope, gently scanned the letter with precision, and then lowered his head. Not just a glance, not a nod. He bowed subtly but unmistakably, then straightened his spine and took one step back. "Ms. Brooks," he said clearly, "you're cleared for immediate entry. I'll personally escort you inside." Travis didn't speak, didn't laugh, didn't even blink, because suddenly he wasn't looking at a woman making a fuss outside the court. He was looking at his superior in status, a federal-level official who had just caught him in the middle of an abuse of authority moment and worse on camera. The young man who'd been filming hadn't moved, but now he wasn't pretending anymore. He was holding the phone upright, no shame, recording steady. Even the court clerks inside had stopped their motion. One had a hand to her mouth. The blonde clerk who earlier made the snide comment, "Gone," slipped away behind the pillars without a word. Ariana took the envelope back, slid it neatly into her case, then turned to Travis one last time. "Now," she said softly, "let's try this again with respect." Her words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They cut, because the tone in her voice was heavier than a shout. It wasn't angry. It wasn't petty. It was controlled power, measured, restrained, and earned. Bowen stepped aside. For the first time since she arrived, he didn't look her in the eye. Hayes motioned with a slight tilt of his hand, but Ariana didn't rush. She walked slowly, deliberately past the line where she had once been told to wait. The courthouse doors opened before her, like a curtain rising on a different world. And everyone who saw it happen would remember it not just because of what she said, but because of how she stood. Still, silent, unshaken. And that, more than any badge or paper, was what truly made the place go quiet. The heavy doors shut behind her with a soft thud, but the silence inside was louder than anything she'd heard on the steps. Ariana Brooks didn't slow her stride as she walked through the courthouse lobby. Her heels tapped against the polished floor in a rhythm steady and composed, but every step carried the weight of what had just happened outside. Eyes followed her, not openly hostile, not entirely welcoming either, just stunned. As if the building itself was struggling to reconcile the image of the woman they had watched wait in the sun with the truth now unfolding in front of them. Officer Hayes followed 2 steps behind, his voice low when he spoke. "Ms. Brooks," he said, "I want to offer you a formal apology on behalf of the courthouse security team. What happened shouldn't have." She didn't look at him. Her face didn't soften. "You don't owe me an apology," she replied calmly. "But someone does." Hayes nodded. "Officer Bowen has been told to remain outside until further notice. Internal Affairs will be contacting your office to coordinate a formal review." Still, she didn't stop walking. Because Ariana wasn't interested in punishment for the sake of punishment. She wasn't here to demand applause or pity. The damage had already been done. And now what mattered was how deep the rot went and how many people had quietly enabled it. The moment she stepped into the elevator and the doors closed behind her, she allowed herself one breath. Just one. It was quiet there. Sterile. Neutral. But her reflection in the steel panel showed everything. Her posture was sharp, her eyes colder than when she'd arrived. Not because she was angry, not even because she was hurt, but because she was locked in. When the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, a tall woman with short silver-streaked hair was already waiting. Maria Delgado stood with her hands clasped in front of her, back straight, chin high. The chief prosecutor of the district. A legend in the legal community, Latina, known for being unshakable. And yet when she saw Ariana, her expression flickered just for a moment with something like regret. "Ms. Brooks," she said. "Welcome. I'm sorry your first hour here had to be that." Ariana stepped forward, her voice even. "I'm not here to celebrate," she said quietly. "I'm here to change the rules." The words didn't hang awkwardly. They landed like a decision that had already been made. Delgado gave a slow nod. "Then we'll make room for that," she said. She turned and led Ariana down the corridor toward a small private conference room, passing closed doors and quiet staff. The air in the hallway was thick, not with noise, but with awareness. Everyone they passed looked up from their screens, then quickly away. Not a single word was spoken, but the tension was electric. Inside the room, Delgado motioned to a seat, then closed the door gently behind them. Before we get into the case reviews, she began, "You should know what happened outside. It's not staying outside." Ariana met her eyes. Delgado continued, "That video's already circulating. Someone leaked it within minutes. Half the staff here's already seen it. So has the director. The DOJ regional rep called 10 minutes ago. Leadership wants a full internal review." Ariana didn't flinch. She just reached into her case, placed her appointment letter on the table, and leaned back. "Good," she said. "Then we start here." Delgado sat down slowly across from her. "You just walked into a firestorm," she said softly. "I didn't come here to avoid fire," Ariana replied. "I came to change what people burn for." The two women sat in silence for a moment, the city humming faintly beyond the glass windows behind them. Somewhere down in the lobby, someone was probably still trying to pretend they hadn't seen what happened. But inside this room, there were no illusions left. There was only clarity, and the beginning of something that wouldn't be quietly pushed aside. The meeting room wasn't large, but it felt tighter than it should have. The windows were shut. The air was still. Everyone sat with that particular stiffness that only came when things were about to get uncomfortable, when people knew what needed to be said, but also knew it wasn't going to go over quietly. Ariana sat at the far end of the table, composed but unreadable. Maria Delgado was beside her, quiet but present. Around them, senior members of the court system, judges, captains, long-serving staff filled the chairs, shifting papers that had nothing to do with the real reason they were there. Captain Boyd, the courthouse security lead, cleared his throat first. "I think what happened this morning," he began carefully, "was unfortunate. Likely a misunderstanding. Officer Bowen's actions, while misguided, may have been based on outdated protocol. He's worked here 15 years, never had a complaint." A beat of silence. Then Judge Weston leaned forward. Everyone in the room looked his way. He was one of the oldest faces in that courthouse, white, deliberate, always the first to speak when someone else hesitated. And this time he didn't disappoint. "Let's not exaggerate a one-time incident," he said. His tone was smooth, dismissive. "We've all had bad mornings. We've all made calls we'd like to take back. That doesn't mean the system's broken. And it sure doesn't mean we need to turn this place upside down over it." A low hum moved through the room. No one interrupted him. They didn't have to. Because Ariana's voice came next, clear, calm, and direct. "You call it one time," she said. "I call it a pattern." Weston turned his head toward her, the hint of a smile on his face. But it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sorry, Ms. Brooks," he said. "But we've never had an issue like this before." Ariana didn't flinch. "You've never seen an issue like this before," she replied. "That doesn't mean it wasn't happening." Judge Weston's eyes narrowed just slightly. Across the table, a younger woman, Deputy Clerk Ramos, shifted in her chair. She didn't speak, but she didn't look away either. And that mattered. Maria stepped in then. "There are documented complaints over the last 5 years," she said. "Filed internally, quietly, often withdrawn under pressure. It's time we look at them. All of them." Captain Boyd exhaled. "You're suggesting we reopen archived personnel reports?" "I'm suggesting," Maria said, "that we stop pretending there's nothing beneath the surface here." Weston's hand landed on the table, not loud, but firm. "You start pulling at threads like that," he said, "you unravel the entire institution." And maybe, Ariana said softly, "That's exactly what needs to happen." No one spoke after that. Not for a long few seconds. Because for the first time in that room, someone had said it out loud. Not hinted, not danced around it, not cloaked it in bureaucracy. They said the quiet part, and everyone heard it. Finally, Maria leaned forward, her voice steady. "I'm filing a formal motion," she said. "An internal review of discrimination-related complaints over the past 5 years across all departments. If we're serious about justice, we have to start with ourselves." There were nods, hesitant, measured, but there. Even Boyd, whose shoulders had tensed at first, gave a slow, reluctant tilt of his head. Only Weston remained still. His silence wasn't agreement. It was resistance masked as professionalism. But the room had shifted, and Ariana saw it. Because sometimes change doesn't start with applause. It starts with discomfort. With someone refusing to make eye contact. With someone finally realizing the old ways don't work in the new light. And in that room, for the first time, the light was starting to seep in. The deeper she went, the darker it got. Ariana sat alone in the dimmed records room, long after the lights in most offices had gone dark. Stacks of yellowing reports lined the table in front of her, some barely legible, others clearly redacted. Pages of denial letters, internal memos with vague explanations, and names. So many names. Names of black and brown citizens who had tried to file appeals, motions requests to be heard only to be turned away at the door. No clear violations, just protocol, policy, misunderstandings. But when you saw the same pattern dozens of times across years and departments, it stopped looking like coincidence. It looked like design. Ariana leaned back, pinched the bridge of her nose, and exhaled. There was a heaviness to this work. Not just because of the injustice, but because of the silence that wrapped around it. Silence from people who should have spoken. Silence from those who were supposed to protect. She flipped a page and a name caught her eye. Malik James. She remembered the name vaguely. There'd been whispers years ago. Something about a young father being thrown out of court for showing up without an attorney. She pulled the report. It was thin. Too thin. Dismissed. No reason recorded. Just an incident notation from security. No follow-up. She asked around. Most people didn't even remember it. But a clerk in the archives did. Said he used to come by every week hoping for a second chance. Said he stopped showing up after someone made him leave in front of his kid. It didn't take long to find him. The address listed was out of date, but a local legal aid office still had a file. Ariana drove across town unannounced and found Malik James behind the counter of an auto shop, sleeves rolled grease under his nails phone clipped to his belt. He didn't recognize her at first, didn't even look twice. But when she introduced herself by name and title, his eyes sharpened. "I remember that courthouse," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Don't got anything good to say about it." She nodded. "I read your file," she said. "I know it wasn't right." He looked at her, then looked away. "Doesn't matter now." Ariana didn't flinch. "It matters to me," she said, "because it's not just your story. It's a thread. And if I pull it, it leads somewhere." He stayed quiet. The buzz of a drill started in the next bay over. She stepped closer, voice low. "They hoped you'd stay silent," she said. "Let's make them regret that." He turned back to her slowly. "You think one story's gonna change anything?" he asked. "I think yours might," she answered. He studied her face for a moment. Something in his shoulders softened, not all the way, but enough. "All right," he said, "but we do it my way." Ariana smiled, but it wasn't a smile of victory. It was the quiet kind, the kind that knows the work is just beginning. Back at her desk that night, she started writing. Not a complaint, not a report. A proposal. Justice starts at the door. That was the title. And beneath it, she outlined a comprehensive plan. Mandatory bias training, restructured intake procedures, multilingual signage, anonymous feedback stations, real-time tracking of denied access cases. A new public complaints portal. A complete audit of 5 years of security screening footage and ID logs. It wasn't about making noise. It was about making it impossible to look away. And as she typed, she imagined Malik standing in that doorway years ago holding a folder and his son's hand being told he didn't belong. That was the moment she kept seeing. That was where the new justice system had to start. Not in the courtroom. At the door. At first it was just a clip. 17 seconds. A black woman standing calmly in front of a courthouse. A white officer blocking her way without so much as a question. The woman reaching into her bag, pulling out a letter with a gold seal. A flicker of shock on the officer's face. And then silence. The clip hit social media late Tuesday afternoon. By Wednesday morning, it was everywhere. News outlets picked it up fast. So did activists, legal blogs, veterans groups, and even a few retired judges. The headline varied from platform to platform, but the image was always the same. Ariana Brooks standing straight, unwavering, while authority stumbled to catch up. By day, 2 peaceful protests had started to form outside the courthouse. Just a handful of people at first, then dozens, then hundreds. Some held signs that read "Respect" at the door. Others simply stood in silence wearing professional suits mimicking Ariana's stance. The pressure mounted. Inside the courthouse, there was a tension no one wanted to name. Maria Delgado, always composed, looked more exhausted by the hour. Ariana, for her part, stayed focused. She kept working, kept refining her proposal, kept collecting testimonies and staff reports. She refused every interview request, every TV offer, every editorial. Her silence somehow made more noise, but Travis Bowen wasn't silent. 3 days after the clip went viral, he appeared on local television. The lighting was soft, the background staged with flags and a bookshelf. He looked nervous, but confident, the kind of man who believed he could still explain his way out of this. "I was doing what I thought was right," he said, hands folded in front of him. "I was following procedures. We've had incidents before, people posing as attorneys. I was just trying to be careful." He didn't apologize. He didn't even mention her name. The backlash was immediate. Online sleuths went to work. Within hours, they found old posts on his social media, jokes at the expense of black professionals, photos of him posing with campaign signs from far-right politicians. A thread on Twitter laid it all out: his patterns, his language, his record. By morning, local headlines had shifted. Court officers passed under scrutiny. As protests grow, refusal to apologize fuels outrage in viral courthouse case. Who's really protecting the courts? Ariana said nothing. She didn't need to. That night, she posted one sentence on her official government page. No photo, no hashtags, no tags. "Letting me in now doesn't undo years of shutting others out." That was it. And it hit harder than any press release. People shared it thousands of times. Some printed it on posters. Some used it in opening remarks at community meetings. Even a few members of Congress referenced it in interviews. Because it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every door that had quietly closed on people who looked like her. Back in the courthouse, Maria approached her office with a soft knock. "They're asking if you'll speak publicly," she said. Ariana shook her head. "I already did." Maria smiled. "I figured you'd say that." And just like that, they returned to their files. The noise of the world outside pressing up against the glass, while inside, two women worked to rewrite the system from the inside out. No one spoke as the doors closed. It was the kind of meeting that didn't happen often. Every court officer, clerk, bailiff, administrator, and judge was seated. Rows of uniforms, robes, and badges lined the room. No coffee, no chatter, just the sound of shifting chairs and the weight of something long overdue. Chief Prosecutor Maria Delgado stood at the front. Hands clasped, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. "This is not a disciplinary meeting. This is a reckoning," she said. "If you're here, it means you're part of this institution. And that means you're part of the responsibility." Then she stepped back, and Ariana Brooks stepped forward. She didn't need a microphone. She didn't raise her voice. But somehow her words echoed through the room like a verdict no one could avoid. "I wasn't stopped for who I am," Ariana said, her eyes slowly scanning the rows in front of her. "I was stopped for what I look like. That's not a misunderstanding. That's not a bad day. That's a pattern." The silence deepened. Some officers shifted in their seats. A few lowered their eyes. "And I wasn't alone," she continued. "I've spoken to others, former clerks, interns, citizens who were treated like they didn't belong. The only thing they had in common was skin that looked like mine." She paused, then turned slightly and nodded. From the side of the room, Malik James stood up. He didn't have a suit. He wasn't a lawyer. But when he spoke, the room leaned in. "I came to this building 6 years ago," Malik said, his voice gravelly but calm. "I had papers in my hand. A real case. A real deadline. I'd done everything right. But before I could even speak, a guard stepped in my way and asked me, 'Are you lost?' He looked down the memory, pulling something out of him like a splinter that had stayed too long. "I wasn't lost," he said quietly. "They were." A long breath moved through the room. Then from the third row, a soft voice broke the silence. It came from a young court clerk, maybe 26, with tired eyes and a badge that looked too heavy on her chest. "I've seen it," she whispered. "For years. Little things. Wrong things. I thought keeping my head down was the smart way, but now," she shook her head, "I've stayed silent too long." No one moved to stop her. No one rolled their eyes, because in that moment, it was like a dam had cracked. One by one, hands went up, not for questions, for truth. Stories spilled out about ignored complaints, double standards, whispered slurs in back offices, missed promotions, biased assumptions. None of it was new. But for the first time, it was spoken in the open in front of everyone. When it was over, Maria stood again. "This court will no longer operate in the shadows of its own comfort," she said. "From this moment forward, we implement full accountability." She laid it out plainly. Mandatory bias training for all staff regardless of rank. Body cams required for every officer on court duty. A full internal audit of discrimination complaints over the last 5 years. An independent review board to monitor all new incidents. And perhaps most importantly, public access to those reviews. No hiding behind closed doors, no sweeping under rugs, just light. As the meeting ended, people stood not out of habit, but because something in them felt changed. Not fixed, not healed, but moved. Ariana walked out without applause, but with purpose. And as Malik followed behind her, a few officers nodded, not in pity, not in obligation, but in recognition. Because now the system had to answer for itself. And for the first time in a long time, justice had actually begun inside the courthouse, not just within its walls. It didn't come with sirens or shouting, no pounding fists or dramatic walkouts. Just a quiet memo circulated to every office in the courthouse at 7:02 a.m. Travis Bowen had been officially dismissed from duty. No one clapped. No one cheered. But the silence in the hallways that morning, it said more than any applause ever could. People read the message, paused, and carried on, but their steps were slower, their eyes more thoughtful. Justice, it seemed, had finally started to move in a different direction. Lindsay Marsh was reassigned. Not fired, not humiliated, just moved somewhere she could do less harm, at least for now. There were no press releases, just another line in the system beginning to shift. Meanwhile, Ariana Brooks arrived earlier than usual. She didn't want a parade. She didn't want interviews or flowers or anyone looking at her like she was the story. She had work to do, and today more than ever, that work mattered. What she didn't expect was the sealed envelope waiting on her desk. Inside was a letter from the Department of Justice. They were offering her the role of Federal Oversight Chair, a newly created position to monitor and enforce courtroom equity policies across the Eastern Circuit. A powerful seat, a national voice, a chance to lead reform beyond state borders. Maria Delgado found her standing at the window, letter in hand, unreadable expression on her face. They finally saw what the rest of us already knew, Maria said gently. Ariana didn't answer right away. She was watching a young black man walk past the courthouse steps outside, head high, pace steady. No one stopped him. No one questioned his right to be there. She exhaled slow and even. "I didn't come here to climb ladders," she finally said, placing the letter back into its envelope. "I came to clear a path." Maria studied her in silence, then smiled. "You've started something bigger than any verdict." But Ariana shook her head, her voice quiet. "Let's just keep the door open for the next person." And with that, she folded the offer, slipped it into her drawer, and returned to her case files. Later that week, a new sign was placed outside the security entrance. It was small, no gold trim, no ceremonial unveiling, just a plain wooden plaque that read, "Justice starts here." There was no name on it, no mention of Ariana Brooks. But the people who worked in that building, they knew exactly who it was for. It had been exactly 7 days. The courthouse looked the same. Same stone columns, same humming of fluorescent lights above the main entrance, same flow of footsteps shuffling in and out as morning hearings got underway. But somehow the energy felt different, like the air had been cleared, like the weight of something invisible had finally lifted. Ariana Brooks stood off to the side, not in her usual heels and suit, but in flats and a soft navy coat. She wasn't working that morning. She just wanted to watch. From her vantage point, she could see the security gate. No one was being stopped unnecessarily. Officer Hayes stood at his post with quiet presence, checking IDs without judgment, offering polite nods to each person who approached. And then it happened. A girl couldn't have been older than 20 approached the steps. She was black, neatly dressed, shoulders squared, but her eyes carried that hesitation Ariana knew all too well. The kind that lingers when you've been taught the rules might change the moment you reach the door. She paused, just for a second. Not enough to be noticed by most, but Ariana saw it, the shift in posture, the flicker of uncertainty. Hayes stepped forward. No clipboard, no interrogation, no sideways glance. Just a soft smile. He reached out, pulled the door open, and held it there. "Good morning," he said. "Go right on in." The girl blinked, nodded, and stepped through. As she passed the threshold, her eyes met Ariana's just briefly. No words were exchanged, just a look, one of quiet recognition, a thank you that didn't need to be spoken. Ariana smiled back and gave a small nod. The girl disappeared into the building, and Hayes let the door swing closed behind her. It was simple, almost nothing. But for Ariana, it was everything. She turned and began to walk away, her footsteps light steady. No cameras followed her. No one asked for a quote. And she didn't need any of it, because she had seen the change. Not in the headlines, not in the reports or reforms, But in the moment that door opened and no one questioned whether it should. As the courthouse faded behind her, Ariana's voice came to us like a whisper, clear and true. Some doors weren't meant to keep us out. They were just waiting for someone brave enough to walk through first. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful story. Ariana's journey reminds us that justice isn't just about courtrooms and verdicts. It's about how we treat one another before the doors even open. It's about courage, accountability, and refusing to stay silent in the face of quiet discrimination. If this story resonated with you, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in fairness, and subscribe to Mr. Max Stories for more true-to-life stories that matter. Your support gives our creative team the strength to keep crafting meaningful, high-quality content that brings untold voices into the light. Because at Mr. Max Stories, we don't just tell stories, we remember, and we pass them on. See you in the next one.